The Niners announced their presence with authority. The Bengals are back on track, and the Jaguars are never, ever leaving London. More on week 5 as we come back here with the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Nick Whalen. Got a lot to go over today. Excited about talking about what's happened so far in week 5. Going to start off the top, though, with some negative news. Looks like Aaron Jones isn't going to play tonight in Monday Night Football. Nick, I got Jones active in 2 leagues. I got to go do the scramble drill, and I got to figure out if there's a drop, if there's a pivot. It's ugly.
Yeah, I'll be doing the same thing in a couple of leagues. I was just telling you off air, we got that report from, I believe it was Tom Pelissero of NFL Network about 15 minutes ago. We've been monitoring Aaron Jones throughout the week, but I thought with the long week, they played on Thursday a week ago. Obviously, you're traveling out to Vegas, but still 10 days to kind of get Aaron Jones back to where he needs to be. We saw him on the field, even in the second half after Green Bay fell behind big to Detroit last week. We saw plenty of Aaron Jones in the second half, and maybe he didn't look fully like himself, and he didn't see a full snap load, but there was no initial indication that anything had turned for the negative after that game. So this is pretty surprising. Pelissero revealed that he hasn't been 100% really for the last week and a half, hasn't been practicing in full. We knew that, but you kind of figured Green Bay was being cautious, and that really kind of throws me into a bit of a bind for fantasy purposes, but for this game as well. I'm on Green Bay in staff picks. I picked Green Bay in my article. I got them in the Pick'em League as well, and we kind of knew this would be a difficult game on the road at Las Vegas, especially based on the side of the Packers that we saw last season. But you take Aaron Jones away from a team that struggled to establish the run, and that really changes things as far as how the outlook of this game goes tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got Aaron Jones in the RotoWire Stake League. It's already a struggling team.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, like, it's not just that I have a lack of options to pick up. It's just, do I have a drop that hasn't played yet? I guess I could drop Deontay Johnson or Josh Palmer if I can find somebody to pick up. I think I'm allowed to do that. But in a lot of cases, your players have all played. There's 2 teams left. Your pivot options are nil. I mean, I guess maybe the fact that there are 4 teams on bye could help you just a little bit. But I don't even know if there's anybody I could pick up anyhow. So that's the thing that's super frustrating.
Yeah, I'm going through that as well. I in the RotoWire Vegas League, which was actually drafted for me by Tech Tim. So shout out to him.
Yeah,
I have Aaron Jones, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Kenneth Walker in that league. So it's obviously Walker's on a bye. Gibbs was ruled out somewhat surprisingly this past week. And now Aaron Jones. So I'm in a bind here. I mean, I'm gonna after this kind of try to find somebody from either of these teams to pick up. I mean, in that league, it could even be a receiver. You have some flexibility as far as the number of running backs and receivers that you start each week. But yeah, it's a disaster scenario for most fantasy owners. There's not really an obvious pivot. There's not somebody out there who is just sitting there, waiting to pick up 15 fantasy points tonight. So in all likelihood, if you needed Aaron Jones to get you 15 to 20 tonight, you're probably losing that matchup.
Yeah, I benched. By the way, I benched Zach Moss so I could start Aaron Jones in the league. So.
Perfect.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
Oh, he didn't do anything this week, right?
No, nothing. He was totally marginalized because Taylor's back.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Nope, and it's on my fantasy league, so global player lock, so I can stop looking for anybody to pick up because I can't pick up anybody. So there you go. There you have it there. Good times. All right. Now we got our angst out of the way. If you have Justin Jefferson, we're still on further evaluation of his hamstring injury. Speaking of angst, a lot of angst there, but we'll see what happens with him. I got the Bears this week, I think. So you need Jefferson on that wall. He didn't do much last week against the Chiefs, but we'll see. Waiting on that one a little bit there too.
Yeah, it's one of those games where it's like Minnesota could probably still win that game without Justin Jefferson, but for fantasy, you absolutely want him out there going up against that Bears defense. And we'll talk about the Bears at some point. Obviously, they played on Thursday night. The offense finding its footing over these last couple of games, but this is still a defense that you absolutely want to be targeting in fantasy. And we'll see on Jefferson. Kind of went out of that game against the Chiefs late after making a cut and just kind of coming up lame. Honestly, kind of amazing that it doesn't happen more often with the kind of I guess severity of the suddenness of his movements. You watch the cuts that Justin Jefferson makes. It's a lot of pressure on those ligaments and on the muscles in those legs. So we hope Justin Jefferson's okay. We'll talk about some of the other injuries that we're monitoring coming out of Week 5. We saw Daniel Jones go out late in the Giants' loss to the Miami Dolphins. Got some Tyrod Taylor action at the end of that game. To me, Daniel Jones he was sacked 6 times. He was taking a number of hits. There was kind of one final hit to the head neck area that knocked him out of the game. It also felt like it was kind of over at that point. So you wonder how much that factored into the decision. But nonetheless, that's another big one.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll be tracking all of those and a whole lot more. I mean, I will say one more thing about Jefferson. It happened, on making a cut. Travis Kelce aggravated that ankle, making a cut. In fact, that looked a lot worse at the time, right before half. The way Tony Romo especially reacted, like, oh no.
Romo was talking like Kelsey's career was over. It was kind of funny. I mean, and look, normally you don't see the negative side of things on TV. If anything, they try to spin it more positively. But anybody who watched that play, you're thinking, I know the word Achilles was trending. Like, it didn't really strike me as an Achilles type injury. I mean, his leg just it looked like it kind of got caught up and buckled. Right. But I certainly did not expect to come back from the final commercial of halftime and there's Travis Kelce jogging around with his helmet on the sideline. At the very least, you're thinking, okay, he's probably done for this game, and hopefully this is a week-to-week injury and not season-ending. But yeah, for him to come back in the game, for the most part, look like himself, catch a touchdown, that was a huge, huge sigh of relief.
Yeah, exactly. So I had to go somewhere, so I was like, I was telling people at my soccer game, Kelce got hurt. Now I got to scramble again. Nope. Or maybe not. We'll see. I will say a couple of non-contact things on that turf in Minnesota. Wonder if that's kind of like an issue going forward there a little bit there, but we'll see about that. Let's start hitting the games. Let's start off with the Thursday night game before we get into the happy talk. The Bears and the Commanders. Nick, I'm in a league where I started off on Thursday night. I'm up against Justin Fields, DJ Moore, and Cole Kmet. Game over. I mean, my fantasy game was over by 8:00 Thursday night, my time.
Yeah, I think in most leagues it was a 49-point week for DJ Moore. And obviously, if you have him paired with Justin Fields, that was pretty much game over for you after that one. 4 touchdowns for Fields, 15 of 29 passing, 282. A couple long ones for DJ Moore. He goes 8 for 230. He was the only Bears receiver to catch a pass in this game. The only other two were Cole Kmet and Robert Tonyan. So very limited, kind of unique offensive game for Chicago. They saw the long touchdown at the end of the game to DJ Moore. That felt like to be 8 times out of 10. That's either broken up or it's going the other way for a pick six. I don't know how the defender somehow did not get his hands on that ball. Don't really fault the defender in that scenario. I think you need to create a play. There was 4 minutes left in the game. If you're Washington, you have to take that chance. You can't necessarily go for the tackle, but that was just insult to injury if you were playing against DJ Moore. And the Bears obviously needed this game. We saw the offense turn around last week against Denver. They end up blowing it. There were certainly times in this game where you felt like we were going to head down that same narrative, but Bears were able to force a couple of turnovers. This was a sloppy game, really from the jump for the Washington Commanders, who I expected to come out and kind of make a statement here against what I thought was one of the 2 or 3 worst defenses in the NFL. I don't know that that's necessarily changed, but Washington just got completely kind of blown its doors off in the beginning of this game, and it felt like never really recovered from that initial impact.
Yep. 17.7% of Circa Survivor people used the Commanders. Thank you. Love that. I mean, I thought about it myself. And in fact, I think in one of my other Survivor pools, whereas we get a couple of strikes, I did use them thinking just to diversify my picks a little bit. But no, I mean, in Circa, I remain super chalky. And I went with the Lions. So in fact, I almost regret going with the Lions once I knew Amon-Ra St. Brown wasn't going to play. Right.
Well, and
Gibbs, although they don't use Gibbs anyhow. That's the thing though. But you know what? With the command, it's kind of funny. I'm looking at, I always look at the ESPN box score page, and there's 3 links to videos on the right-hand side. And I think the narratives about this game are so funny. McAfee, Ron Rivera looks like he's checked out. Why Stephen A could see Eric Bieniemy taking over as Commanders head coach. And should the Bears trade Justin Fields after his big game? Okay, those are your storylines. Okay, great.
Yeah, gotta get rid of Justin Fields right now. That's for sure. Sell high. I don't think the Bears will be doing that, but it certainly makes this more complicated evaluation, right? I mean, with Justin Fields, it does kind of feel like you're going week to week with him,
Yeah.
and these last 2 weeks have certainly been a hell of a lot more encouraging than the first three, and it's a really complicated situation here because I even this win notwithstanding, I still think the Bears are going to be very much in the mix for the number one pick, whether it's their own pick or it's the Carolina pick, a winless
Right.
team. Panthers. I mean, they're at the very, very least, they're going to be in position to trade up to number one if they want to, because they're probably going to have two of the top, at worst 7 picks in this draft, and likely at least one of those will be in the top 3, if not both. So, yeah, it's a really tough situation if you're a Bears supporter. We've talked to guys like Danny Burke and Dan Kilbridge on the radio show quite a bit, and I love checking in with them week to week because it really feels like it's just this constant ebb and flow of, all right, are we in on Justin Fields? Are we not in on Justin Fields? And I still think, regardless of what we see for Fields, barring just a scorched earth finish to the season here, which to me seems pretty unlikely, if you have the opportunity to bring in someone like Caleb Williams, I think you have to do it. But all of a sudden, Fields is making that a little bit more difficult of an evaluation.
Yeah, I don't think they end up with the number 1 overall pick unless it's Carolina's, but I still think there are worse teams than Carolina out there. I think Carolina is just, they've got such a really bad offensive line, and I think Bryce Young is still getting some growing pains.
Yeah.
But they still have a real defense. I don't know. I don't see them as the worst team out there. So that's just my impression. Couple other quick notes. Khalil Herbert got hurt and looks like he's going to miss multiple weeks. He was on his way to a pretty big game. Rashawn Johnson had a concussion in this game. They even lost Travis Homer in this game. So we could see healthy scratch Deonta Foreman get some run next week.
Yeah. Default, we finally might see him, as part of the mix. Didn't really see any of that on Thursday night. We saw Kari Blossingame get into the backfield. He had 8 carries for 26 yards. The Bears built that early lead and were still semi-aggressive, but also trying to sit on that in the second half. And it was a productive game on the ground for Chicago. 32 carries, including 11 for Justin Fields, for 178 yards on a Washington defense that I think on paper you look at that D line and say, okay, this should be one of the better in the NFL, and that they're kind of right in the middle of the pack. They haven't been a disastrous defense thus far, but you look at some of just the raw point totals that they've allowed, some of the comebacks that they've allowed. They've had kind of half of their games, it feels like they're the team coming back. The other half, they're falling behind early. This offense, we knew would have some variance with Sam Howell. He's the type of player I think in general you kind of want, somebody who's going to take risks, somebody who can throw you back into a game. We've already seen it a couple of times this year, but the defense getting blitzed early against this Bears attack to me was really surprising.
Indeed. Let's move on, and we'll take random questions in the chat at the end, but right now we're trying to stay on point. Let's move on. It's Happy Lid Day here. We're both wearing our respective team hats. Let's jump right into the Jaguars there as the next game. Two games in London, 2 wins, and this one was better representation of the Jaguars too.
I hope so. I hope this is the team they are. You look at the point total, 25. It's not going to blow you away, but I think in a lot of ways this was in the conversation as the best game of Trevor Lawrence's career. He was still sacked 5 times. The offensive line, even with Cam Robinson back, I think is an issue. But you're going to go up against one of the best defenses in the NFL. Although the Bills, we knew they lost Trey White last week. They lose Matt Milano in this game. They had a few other injuries, kind of random depth pieces throughout this game. So there was some attrition, I think, that affected the Buffalo side of things. But when Trevor Lawrence was clean, I think he was 11 of 13 passing, just really was on point. We had the deep ball to Calvin Ridley that basically sealed the game, long third down. It was essentially the exact same play that we saw from Justin Herbert to Josh Palmer last week. And, it's not necessarily what you want, your quarterback taking a huge hit and just whipping it up there, but a perfect ball by Trevor Lawrence, a perfect kind of over the shoulder catch by Calvin Ridley, who I think exercised some of the demons that had been haunting him the last couple of weeks. Some drops. Only had a couple of targets a week ago. I mean, this was easily his best showing in a Jags uniform. He goes 7 for 122. They got Christian Kirk going as well. Zay Jones was back this week. He caught a touchdown, ended up actually leaving in the second half with an injury. So that's another one that we'll be tracking over the course of this week. But to me, it was the running game. It was, getting Travis Etienne established. 26 for 136, had the long 35-yarder at the end of the game. 2 touchdowns for Etienne. And then the other side of that, I mean, holding the Buffalo Bills to one of their worst rushing games of the entire Josh Allen tenure. James Cook, 5 carries for -4 yards. They did a good job containing Josh Allen. on the ground. I mean, 14 for 29 as a team. If you're the Buffalo Bills, I mean, they flashed a stat early in this game, Jeff, that the Bills had only had 4 3-and-outs on the entire season coming into this game. And I think they had 3 in the first half against Jacksonville. So I did not think the Jags defense would step up in this spot, but credit to them. And that's why the hat is back.
Yeah, for sure. And it could have been, a bigger score. I mean, Lawrence lost 2 fumbles in the red, like in offensive territory. I think one was in the red zone.
Yep.
Sack fumbles, both. I mean, and he avoided some other sacks there too. So the offensive line is an issue. Cam Robinson struggled and then got hurt a little bit too. So that's something to watch for there a little bit. So that there is things to work on. There's always things to work on, but at least you can identify that a little bit more. I think it's noteworthy just how stark the difference in snaps is between ETN and Bigsby. A lot of people were worried about Bigsby in week 1. He was getting a lot of passing down snaps. That's not happening anymore. ETN's getting a lot more targets this year. I'm encouraged by that as much as I am the running too. 4 for 48 in the air.
He looked fantastic in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think this was a reminder of just how special this guy is when you get him some space. And even the touchdown run, he's kind of looked like he was maybe going to be stacked up at the line and just bursts out of there for 35 yards. I mean, just the suddenness, some of the long strides that he takes for being a shorter guy. I mean, he's a tough player to bring down despite not being all that big. You mentioned the Lawrence fumbles. I mean, those were killers. One of them I didn't think was his fault, just kind of got blindsided from behind. The second one, you just got to take care of the ball there. But both of those were inside the Buffalo 25-yard line. So at the very least, you think you're getting field goals on those drives. Bills had a quick touchdown late, right when it seemed like Jacksonville had kind of sealed it up. 4-play drive, all of a sudden they score, turn it back into a 5-point game. Jags punt, and the Bills kind of have like 2 desperation plays and ended up fumbling on what appeared to be some sort of hook and ladder attempt. But frustrating day for the Bills offense. Again, could not get the running game going at any point. They were just 5 of 12 on third down. The Jags finally got it going on late down situations, Jeff. I love the aggressiveness. We didn't see so many short passes. They racked up almost 500 yards of total offense. In terms of total plays, 82 for Jacksonville, 54 for the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, Jacksonville won the time of possession battle pretty handily. 10 of 18 on third down. That's been the biggest thing for Jacksonville. I don't think I've been down on the Jags just because I'm a dumb reactionary fan. But that's really been the difference for them is they have not been able to convert. You're not asking them to convert every 3rd and 12, but it's the 3rd and 1s, the 3rd and 2s that have been holding this team back.
Right.
When you're converting those at better than a 50% clip, I think this is the Jags offense that we envisioned.
Indeed. Speaking of dumb reactionary fans, I'm wearing my Bengals lid here, and I thought that the Cardinals should have been at least a pick 'em, if not a favorite against the Bengals. I was wrong about that. I'm very happy to be wrong about that, Nick. The Bengals, again, they have their issues still too. They still need to protect Burrow better. They need to stop the run better. But at least for one day, things were kind of back to normal. Burrow to Chase was just unstoppable. It really is true. Chase is always open.
I mean, you kind of forgot that T. Higgins wasn't playing in this game, right? Because Jamar Chase was so dominant. Trent Irwin, Tyler Boyd stepped up with some big catches as well. But it was all about Chase. I believe he set the franchise record for catches, 15 for 192 and 3 scores. It was not an overly efficient day for Joe Mixon. He goes 25 for 81, but needed him to run some clock in the second half. Getting off to a big start, I think, was key for Cincinnati, right? I think last week they had the long drive that kind of stalled out. You get a field goal there. And from then on, the offense couldn't do a whole lot. I mean, they scored a touchdown on their first drive, a field goal on the second drive. Credit to Arizona for climbing back into this game, though. I mean, Arizona got punched in the mouth. All of a sudden, it's 14-10 Cardinals with back-to-back touchdown drives midway through the second. Bengals go 3 and out after that. And you're like, oh, man. Oh, okay. Here, are we doing this again? If you're Cincinnati. And then, the following drive, another long one, 13 plays. They get stuffed at the goal line on 4th and goal. And immediately pick 6 right after that. Like that to me is when this game truly flipped, because Arizona had all the momentum, coming off of those 2 touchdowns, coming off of that stuff. And then the just awful pick 6 by Josh Dobbs felt like flipped this game just before halftime. Bengals get the ball coming out of the second half, put up another touchdown. And once it got to 10 points, I know Arizona scored on its next drive, but you just kind of felt like Cincinnati was back in control.
Yeah, I was a little worried after Arizona scored again on their next drive, because that was when DeMarcado was just running very effectively. Like, stop
of all people.
Yeah, I mean, the other guy from TCU, right. Uncle Ted asked, is he a must add? He's a might add. I mean, they face the Rams this upcoming week. I could think of worse matchups. I could think of better ones. A lot depends on Connor. A lot depends on Ingram to see if he's back. And, how much are they going to run? Rondale Moore is going to steal some of those carries too. So that's also something to watch for a little bit there too. But there's a sequence at the end of the second quarter, which I thought turned the game. Bengals are down 14-10. They get stuffed on 4th and 1. And by the way, they had 2 plays. Mixon was actually getting it to 3rd and goal at the 1. They had 2 good runs up the middle. I'm like, okay, I can see it pounding up the middle. They failed twice running it up the middle. Second one, the 4th down play was really close, but was clearly short. His knee was down. But I still was in favor of it because the Bengals still had their 3 timeouts. Field position could still matter. And then obviously the pick 6 happened. And that's another one of the range of outcomes of things that could happen. And that play right there turned the game. All of a sudden, Cardinal, instead of the Cardinals feeling good about themselves, they give up the pick 6. They're trailing at halftime. They almost got picked again before halftime. Logan Wilson almost had another pick, but big game changer there. And Cam Taylor-Britt, got the return for the touchdown. They did a great little zone blitz that confused Josh Dobbs. Dobbs had his worst game of the year. Pretty big sequence there.
Yeah, I think the other thing with Dobbs, outside of throwing the 2 picks, he lost a fumble as well that turned into points for Cincinnati. They kept Josh Dobbs contained on the ground, and this was really the only team that's been able to do that so far, right? He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not racking up 85 yards every week, but it's felt like each of these previous 4 games, there's been a couple like backbreaking, 2nd and long, 3rd and longs where Josh Dobbs is ripping off a 20-yard run, and I think that had to be a point of emphasis for the Cincinnati defense, not having Josh Dobbs involved as a runner whatsoever. His longest run of the day was 2 yards. It was just not a factor. That was huge for Cincinnati on defense. And, on DeMarcado, to me, it depends 100% on Connor. Like, we have no idea what's going on with that knee. We haven't had an update yet today. I'm not sure if we'll get that today or tomorrow, but he was able to jog back to the locker room. Like, this didn't look like a devastating injury necessarily, but obviously did not come back into the game. So I'm not rushing out to pick up DeMarcado until we know that James Conner is at the very least, 50-50 to play next week. If that's the case, then yeah, I think you go grab him. They'll likely, get Corey Clement involved to some degree if James Conner is unavailable. But I really like what I saw from DeMarcado on somewhat of a limited basis.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one there. The fact that they didn't go to Clement at all. Maybe it's just he wasn't ready for that or something. I don't know.
Didn't take a single snap. It was a little odd.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, we're in leagues where we have to make waiver moves on Tuesday night. So we won't know unless the Cardinals say anything today, because we know they won't say anything tomorrow. Tuesday being like the quietest news day of the weekly schedule there, unless you're one of the Thursday night teams. So anyhow, we're on the Blue Wire Network. Here are their ads. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for your indulgence. Thanks to the Blue Wire Network for hosting us. Let's roll on with breaking down the schedule for the week here. Go back to the early slate of games. Colts with a big win at home, despite losing to Anthony Richardson, beat the Titans 23-16. Things are setting up well for the Jaguars in the AFC South. Tennessee losing yesterday, and as well as Houston losing yesterday. Pretty good day for the Jags, and also, you already have a win in hand over the Colts in Indy, no less. And they just lost Anthony Richardson for a period of weeks.
I don't know if that's a bad thing, though, right? We've talked about this a few times, partially because Richardson's already missed time, and some of these other rookie quarterbacks, Bryce Young, having Andy Dalton step in for him. If I had known that Gardner Minshew was going to play the majority of this game, I think I would have picked the Colts in staff picks, because I think he kind of unlocked something through the air that Anthony Richardson does not. And obviously, Richardson is a special player on the ground, but this is now 2 injuries for him that have involved him carrying the ball, right? And I don't think you look at him body wise and say, oh, this isn't somebody that we want getting outside the pocket. Like that's a huge part of the appeal with Anthony Richardson, is he has to be able to kind of absorb those hits and a lot of times be on the kind of dishing out end of those hits. But this is looking like an injury. If it is indeed the AC joint that we think it is, we could be looking at multiple weeks here. Colts actually play the Jaguars next week, so they'll get that second Jags game out of the way. Big opportunity for Jacksonville. They will not take a bye, by the way, coming back from London, and they play on Thursday night the week after. So kind of a tough month long here for the Jags with all the travel and the short weeks, but they get their week 9 bye. Nonetheless, big opportunity for Jacksonville to kind of get 2 up on the Indianapolis Colts. Very strange game overall. I mean, every Titans game feels strange to me in some ways. Like, this is an offense that I don't think we really talk about them as, in the same category as like Chicago or Pittsburgh or some of these teams that feel like they just could barely move the ball. But there are certain weeks, man, where the Titans just feel kind of helpless if they can't get Derrick Henry going. And this is the fourth time now in 5 games that Derrick Henry has been completely bottled up. 13 for 43, essentially split snaps with Tajay Spears, although they're on the field together a decent amount as well. That's been an increasing trend over the last couple of weeks. And it was, the Indianapolis Colts that were the team that was able to go up and down the field on the ground. Yeah. Zach Moss, another huge game, 23 for 165 and 2 scores at the long 56-yarder. We did see some Jonathan Taylor. Had a nice catch and run for 16 yards, but only played 10 snaps.
Yeah, I overestimated how many snaps Taylor would play. I actually had him ranked ahead of Moss. I benched Moss in a league. Whoopsies. That one's gonna leave a mark. Moss looked great against the Titans, no less. You don't run against the Titans. That's the thing. You're like, oh, you're running. I was
told.
Yeah. And Moss went 23, 165. He actually had 2 catches for 30 yards too. Moss was the star of the game.
Yeah, and this is the second or third time this year that we could say that. I mean, he looks really, really good. Obviously, you expect Jonathan Taylor, especially after the extension, now that they're committed to him, you expect him to take on a larger share. But I mean, the way Zach Moss is playing, I think it's kind of going to be a situation where we have to see both of them, at least in the short term here. On the Tennessee side of things, I mean, not much to take away from this offense, as is typically the case, but DeAndre Hopkins, easily his best game of the season, had some monster catches, some kind of vintage DeAndre Hopkins catches in traffic. He goes 8 for 140, did not find the end zone, however. On the Indy side, Josh Downs, 6 for 97. Michael Pittman, 5 for 52. That was about it in the receiving game. And this is a team that uses a bunch of tight ends. Mo Alley Cox, I think, went out of this game. So we saw a little bit more of guys like Drew Ogletree and Kylan Granson. But, 2 teams that have a very limited number of fantasy relevant players that we're worried about. Nick Westbrook-Akina didn't really do anything. Traylon Burks' value continues to just bottom out week to week. We did see Chika Okonkwo get 9 targets, but caught only 5 of those for 33 yards. So no real change there.
Yeah. Spears, I think it was the takeaway. He looked good. I thought I was impressed with him. In addition to Hopkins, obviously, who was great. I actually used Hopkins in DFS this week. That was fun. Would have been nice if he got in the end zone, but other than that, it was pretty darn good. We had a question in the chat earlier from Tyler Sperry asking about thoughts on Michael Pittman. He's good. He got 7 targets, but he's not getting too many big plays. I'm not sure Minshew unlocks him that much more than Richardson does.
No, not really. And it kind of goes counter to what I said, where I feel better about this passing game with Minshew, and I still do believe that. But I mean, Pittman's kind of the one guy who was sustaining with Anthony Richardson, and so for him, I don't think it's not necessarily a downgrade, but I don't think he gets upgraded as much as some of the secondary pass catching options do for Indy. I mean, to me, he's still the clear number 1 guy. The receptions have not really added up with the targets the last couple of weeks. I mean, 12 targets, brought in only 6 of those. Had kind of a disaster week in week 4 against the Rams, but prior to that, 9 catches over the first 3 weeks. I mean, if you're asking, should I try to unload him? I would say probably not. I mean, you don't have a ton of plus matchups coming up. Jacksonville, Cleveland, and New Orleans are the next 3 for Indy, but I don't know that you're going to get any option back in a Michael Pittman trade that you feel a whole lot better about. Like, ultimately, he's still the number 1 receiver in that offense. So I'd probably hold him.
Yeah, I think I probably would too. The Jacksonville game could be good, revenge game. But otherwise, I mean, Cleveland and New Orleans, I mean, that's pretty nasty back to back there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those aren't going to be plus matchups by any means, but you never know. Yeah, you never know. I mean, he went 9 for 77 against what we consider to be a pretty good Baltimore defense, although one that continues to struggle in the secondary, as we'll get to.
Indeed. Every week I rewatch every game on NFL Plus, just the condensed version. I couldn't do the full 2.5 hour version, but every week I stall before watching the New England game. And this is no different this week. What a disaster, Nick.
Patriots are the worst offense in the NFL, and it's really not close at this point. If you look into a lot of the advanced numbers, they are dead last in rushing EPA. They are somehow not dead last, but they are 31st in passing EPA. Oh my goodness, man. This is the game that I have the fewest notes for. I don't even know what you say about New England at this point. I mean, you could just kind of pencil in Ramondre Stevenson for these like 8 for 20 type of games every week now. We continue to see more Ezekiel Elliott. He didn't really give them a whole lot either. I mean, the Patriots receiving core is just depressing if you're talking about it from a fantasy perspective. It's interesting because we've seen a couple of these like back against the wall, you might lose your job type of games from some other quarterbacks this year. Desmond Ridder, for example, I thought played about as well as he could have this past week. Zach Wilson has kind of staved off, some of the questions that he's been facing the last 2 weeks. And I was wondering, like, can Mac Jones do the same? Coming off of a disaster game last week, and he get back on track, and he, at least kind of quell some of this skepticism and some of this vitriol that's been directed at him. That was a definitive no, Jeff. Had the pick 6 to Tyrann Mathieu early in the game, had another pick, just never settled in. And, I thought fairly, Bill Belichick kind of defended him in the post-game presser. Didn't say that Mac Jones was great, but he said, look, he's not getting a lot of help out there. And that's certainly true. Like, I don't think Mac Jones, is not salvageable, but I mean, this Patriots team it's so strange because we haven't been able to say this about New England in so long, but they're overmatched at quarterback. They're overmatched at receiver. They're overmatched on both sides of the line. We certainly saw the absences of Judon and Christian Gonzalez loom large in this game. I mean, I'm not surprised New England lost. I'm surprised they lost like this at home. If anything, I thought this would be like a 13-10 type of game, but this was just a trouncing from the beginning for New Orleans. And man, I mean, 2 of the worst losses in Bill Belichick's career, back-to-back weeks. It's just unfathomable.
Yeah, it really is. And, there's an end to every story. And I wonder if it might be that there. I mean, the thing is, like with Mac Jones, Bailey Zappe's no improvement. Bailey Zappe was 3 for 9 for 22 yards. He's a guy that got cut, remember, on the first wave of cuts and then added back. They valued him so much, they realized they could get him back on waivers really readily. That's how much they value him. So he's no long-term solution. Are they maybe sleepers in the Caleb Williams showcase here?
Oh, no question at this point. Yeah, you're 1-4. You're 1-4. I mean, what's the upside? It's hard to imagine a New England team like tanking. You just don't see that much in the NFL, and it runs completely counter to everything that we know about Bill Belichick. I don't think he's the guy that's going to want to pack in this season, but they do play at the Raiders next week, and we'll see what the Raiders look like tonight against Green Bay. But that on paper is a somewhat winnable game for New England. Obviously, you don't feel good about them playing anybody right now, but there's issues on defense like that. That feels like a must win because after that, you got the Bills and the Dolphins. So if you lose to the Raiders, you're probably going to be sitting at 1-7. And at that point, there's absolutely no hope for redemption. Like you still got to play the Chargers, you still got to play the Chiefs. You got the Bills and the Jets again later this year. Like it's not like you look at the schedule and say, oh, they'll pick it up in the second half. I mean, this feels. You never want to just completely bail on the Patriots, but we've talked a lot in this pod about the Belichick mystique, man. It feels like it's dead. Bill Belichick can't coach his way out of this. Like this is a bad roster.
I do a weekly radio hit on a main radio station, and they were talking about that very topic, and when you lose the locals, I mean, it doesn't mean it's over, but at the same time, I mean, they it takes you had a lot of capital to burn, and they're burning it all. And that's the issue there. So we'll see. Let's move on. Let's move on and talk. Let's actually talk the Saints real quick. Unless you had Alvin Kamara, you were pretty unhappy about the Saints offensive players too. Olave scored, but 2 for 12. 2 bad weeks in a row.
Yeah, 2 bad weeks in a row for Olave, who was kind of nursing an ankle foot issue. Played his regular snap count. He's actually been like wildly consistent. PFF had a good note on that he's played between like 78 and 82% of the offensive snaps in every week so far. So it wasn't like he was in and out of this game, but just kind of a non-factor for the second straight week. It was targeted 5 times, only brought in 2 of those. Kendrick Miller, I think, came away another winner. Somebody that missed some time to begin the year, but he started to look quite a bit better. Didn't do a whole lot on the ground in this game, but had 4 catches for 53. Just another high volume day for Alvin Kamara. Last week it was through the air. This time on the ground, he goes 22 for 80 at the 1-yard touchdown as well. No Juwan Johnson this week for the New Orleans Saints. So that was part of the reason that we saw Foster Moreau of all people in the end zone.
Yes, indeed. Always, at least it's not Taysom Hill. I guess that's the only thing that makes me a little bit happy about that there. Let's move on to an actual lower scoring game than this. The Ravens and the Steelers as always, a rock fight. The Ravens jumped out to a 10-0 lead. Second quarter, you're like, okay, they're on their way to another good game, a sweep, a road sweep of their division. And instead, they didn't score the rest of the way. How did the Ravens only score 10 points here?
That's a great question, Jeff. Partially because this was one of the worst games you were ever going to see from a collective wide receiver core. I think they were tagged for 7 official drops, including at least 2 that would have been easy walk-in touchdowns. I know some services that kind of go through and do grading and whatnot had as many as 10 drops on the Ravens as far as catchable balls go. Lamar Jackson, the pick on him the pick at the end of the game, I think was on him. Just a bad throw, bizarre play call in that scenario when you're feeling pretty good about just kind of taking the field goal there. Obviously, the defense let them down either way after the interception, but I thought that was strange. Just not really what you're used to seeing from the Ravens in that situation. Nelson Aguilar had a just vintage Nelson Aguilar drop. Zay Flowers had a couple of big ones. One across the middle of the field where it was basically the earliest I've ever seen a player make a move. Like he started making his move like when the ball was still 5 feet away, and ended up looking like a bad throw because of it, but it was right on target. That was the story for the Ravens. I mean, I thought they were going to run away with this game early on. They get a big Lamar Jackson run on a 3rd down on their first drive of the game. All of a sudden, they're at the Pittsburgh 40, and they throw 3 straight passes, 3 straight incomplete, and you end up punting from the Pittsburgh 40-yard line. And that was just kind of emblematic of how this day went for Baltimore. They lost a big fumble by Justice Hill. They went out on downs on a long drive prior to the half. Couldn't really get anything going. Had the punt block for a safety, which they're lucky that was not a touchdown. I mean, that was inches away from being recovered in the end zone. And then, of course, the pick and then the Lamar Jackson fumble at the end of this game. I mean, the Ravens, I thought had a chance. Like they should have been leading this game like 24-0, honestly, early on, probably 24-3 at half. But the receiving core let Lamar down. I think if you watch a lot of like bad TV this morning, you'll see what's wrong with Lamar Jackson. I thought Lamar was fine for the most part.
Yeah, I saw that the first take thing going around there, and first of all, it's first take, so temper your expectations as far as like they're going for the headline. That's their job. I'm not even saying that they're idiots. I'm just saying that it's the format that almost dictates that you get the hottest of takes there, and it's easier to point to Lamar than to pick on Zay Flowers or Nelson Aguilar.
Yeah, I don't think Aguilar's doing the same kind of TV numbers necessarily as Lamar Jackson. And, it's interesting. We continue to see a lot of Aguilar for this Ravens receiving core. Like I thought part of the reason that you bring in Zay Flowers and Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman is so you don't have to rely on Nelson Aguilar for 41 snaps. But he played more than Odell. He played more than Bateman. Devin Duvernay, who I've always kind of liked as like a gadgety guy. Like he's basically out of the offense. He only played 4 snaps on the day. Saw a ton of Mark Andrews. He had 10 targets. Always like to see that. But yeah, just a really strange game. Like these Ravens-Steelers games are always weird. I was on the Ravens. We took the Ravens in Circa. We approached it with caution. We knew what we were getting ourselves into. I think the dog has now covered like 16 out of the last 18 matchups between these teams, which is absolutely insane. But coming out of last week, it was like, what is the case for Pittsburgh here? Like, how do the Steelers do this? And ultimately, the case is, the Ravens drop 10 passes. They turn it over 3 times and just allow Pittsburgh to just hang around in this game. And then, you got to give credit where it's due. Kenny Pickett was not great by any means, but made a money throw to George Pickens on a deep ball to essentially win this game late.
Yeah. And previously, like the Steelers offense was getting booed off the field in the first half. Oh, yeah. I mean, all their scoring for them, came mostly in the fourth quarter. There was a safety in there. There was a touchdown, but missed 2-point conversion, of course. It was vintage Steelers Ravens is what this was. So but we're still waiting for that Todd Monken offense to really start clicking. It hasn't happened yet. I don't know if it's the design, it's the players, or a little of all of the above.
Well, I think if they make even half of those catches that we talked about, this offense looks a lot better. I mean, they threw the ball 38 times, so I think they're attempting to kind of lean more toward Todd Monken's tendencies. But if you're not making catches, it's just simply not going to work. Also didn't have a ton of success running the ball outside of Lamar, who went 6 for 45. Gus Edwards 12 for 48, Justice Hill 7 for 32, and that very, very costly fumble. And then on the other side of this, for the 5th straight week, Jaylen Warren has outscored Najee Harris. Harris carried more, but it was just same old story for Najee Harris. Had nothing longer than 8 yards, 14 for 37, and we saw Jaylen Warren a bit more involved in the passing game as well. Had one long catch and run. So if you're a Najee Harris holder, we're still him and Ramondre Stevenson just kind of continue to mirror each other every week.
Yeah, although it's funny, the advanced metrics say that Harris is breaking more tackles than he ever has. It's just he's having to break more tackles is the problem.
Yeah.
So it's not like I don't feel like Harris is washed. I just feel like the offense is washed. And I think that's the problem, unfortunately, there. Before we move on, let's go ahead and share a quick note from our sponsor, Circa Sports. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. There's no better place to catch the big game than poolside at Stadium Swim at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. A massive 143-foot screen with booming game sound, plus view special pyrotechnics and visual effects throughout the game. Grab the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Don't miss Stadium Swim's big game party, February 11th, only at Circa Resort and Casino in downtown Vegas. Space is going quickly. For more information and to book your seats today, go to circalasvegas.com. That's circalasvegas.com. Big thanks to Circa for sponsoring us all year. We will be sharing more with them. In fact, I'll be talking about the Circa Survivor contest in a moment. We also been doing Circa Pick'em as well. But first, let's talk a little Houston and Atlanta. This was a game, this is one of the first ones I did a rewatch for, actually, because I was kind of intrigued to see it. I feel like this was a lot was left on the field in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the case for both sides. And I would say in particular, Atlanta, who, of course, came out on the winning end, 21-19, game winner for Younghoe Koo after Desmond Ridder led a pretty nice drive, just kind of nickel and dimed his way down the field, had one big one to Drake London that really put the Falcons in field goal range. But this was the perfect Falcons blueprint, right? They're not going to blow teams out, but
right.
They ran 16 more plays. They were 6 yards per play. Over a half yard better than Houston, piled up almost 450 yards of total yardage in this game and won the time of possession 36-24. That is exactly what you want to be doing if you're the Atlanta Falcons. And I thought this was another pretty encouraging game for Houston. Really encouraging game for CJ Stroud, who continues to look good, still has not thrown a pick. Did lose Tank Dell in this game, which can't believe I'm saying this, but is actually a pretty big deal for this Texans offense. We saw Dalton Schultz catch the only touchdown through the air for the Houston Texans from CJ Stroud. Kind of went with a field goal rate approach here offensively. Big day for Kaimi Fairbairn if you're holding him in any leagues, Jeff. But weird game where Atlanta was just kind of swung back and forth the entire time. I will say I did not have a ton of faith that Desmond Ridder was going to be able to lead this team down for a score, especially after the defense gives up that back-breaking touchdown on third down, right? I think it was 3rd and 9. And you're thinking, okay, you got to get something here. I didn't necessarily even kind of consider that they would go for the end zone there. You're more concerned about getting yourself into a manageable 4th down that you need to convert. And really nice throw from Stroud, finding Dalton Schultz in the back of the end zone. But this to me felt like, I don't know if I'd go as far as to say the best game of Ridder's career, but 28 of 37 for 329 and a touchdown without an interception. Also added a rushing touchdown. Yep. I mean, this is exactly the type of game he needed, I think, to stave off those Taylor Heineke calls.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I actually thought we might see Heineke in this game. It was to that point, and in a super flex league, I was stymied at QB, so I took a chance on seeing if maybe one of these backup QBs would come in. That's how bad it was for me. There's just no one starting available on the waiver wire, but didn't work out. But Ridder 329, and yet his receivers, his pass catchers really didn't have big fantasy days. Kyle Pitts 7 for 87. You'll take that in a PPR league. Same with Drake London, 6 for 78. Plus Drake London, you get the bonus of the 22 passing yards as well. And yet though, it's it was Ridder with a rushing touchdown. It was Bijan with a receiving touchdown. Bijan was kept in check all day, and he lost a fumble in this game too. I feel like Atlanta. I feel like Houston tried to key on the running game. I thought that their whole thing was we're gonna make Desmond Ridder beat us, and it was working until that final drive.
I think that's how every team should approach Atlanta, right? Is okay. Yeah. We want to limit Bijan and Algier, and we want to make Desmond Ridder beat us. I think that's exactly what the blueprint should be, and they executed it for the most part. But Desmond Ridder did beat them, right? And it was a lot of short passes, like you said. That's how Kyle Pitts got to 7 for 87 on 11 targets. Kind of the same story for London and Jonnu Smith. Smith also lost a huge fumble in this one too.
Yep.
When you say Atlanta left points on the board, I mean, they were in clear field goal, if not touchdown territory, had it not been for that fumble.
Yep.
And the Bijan fumble, I think, was at like their own 25 or 30. So that led directly to points for the Texans as well. Both of those very, very costly. Did not see a turnover on the Houston side of this one. But yeah, I mean, still going to be frustrating for Kyle Pitts. It was out-snapped still by Jonnu Smith in this game. So you like what you see as far as the final yardage and target numbers for Kyle Pitts, but I don't think there's a lot of data that suggests that that's going to be sustainable week to week, especially, if they continue to use Jonnu Smith as heavily as they have. So I don't think we're really out of the woods here by any means on Kyle Pitts. He played 40 snaps to 49 for Jonnu Smith, and that's 40 of a possible 76. I mean, Kyle Pitts is not even on the field for almost half of the Falcons' plays. It's crazy.
It feels like anytime there's a running play, he's not going to be in there.
And that's kind of a tip for the defense too.
Yeah, it could very well be. Tangentially related, Uncle Ted asks, pick one of these tight ends, Ferguson, Schultz, who could get a lot of volume next week if both Dell and Robert Woods, who got banged up in this game, if both of them are out, Schultz should get a pretty heavy volume, or Zach Ertz also in that mix. So I think it's like a week-to-week proposition. Ferguson, Schultz, and Ertz are all going to be playable tight ends.
Yeah, those are all kind of in the same grouping for me. I actually really like what I've seen out of Jake Ferguson, and last night's game just got so out of hand that it was hard to judge a whole lot. I mean, we saw Cooper Rush with 8.5 minutes left in that game. They get the Chargers next week. I think that's certainly an exploitable defense. So I think I would give, if we're just talking like who are you starting next week, I would lean Jake Ferguson. But yeah, you can make a case for any of those guys.
I think if Dell and or Woods are out, I'd go Schultz. And I think Ertz has got volume, and he actually scored yesterday, but he's probably third on that list for me. All right, let's move on to the next game here. And that game is Detroit beating Carolina Panthers 42-24 in this one. This game really wasn't in doubt, Nick. Detroit jumped them early. It was 14-0 really quick. Aiden Hutchinson had a really awesome interception off a screen pass. David Montgomery delivered early. And then, of course, Sam Laporta, another tight end that, it did a podcast this week with John Hecklin, and we talked about all the tight end angst out there. But if you have Sam Laporta, you're feeling pretty good right now.
You're feeling great about it, and you're feeling great about that pick if you're Detroit. I mean, that looks like it's going to be a player who not only pays dividends for this season, but is going to be a huge, big-time foundational player for that organization for the next decade. So that's looking like a home run. As we mentioned earlier, no Jahmyr Gibbs in this game. We knew that would mean high volume for David Montgomery. That was once again the case. 19 for 109 and a touchdown for Montgomery. Had a long one that came after a second consecutive immediate turnover by the Carolina Panthers. This was a 14-7 game. The Panthers got a big stop on fourth down, get the ball back, and immediate fumble by Miles Sanders. That turns into a long touchdown drive for Detroit. Carolina gets the ball back. Immediate pick by Bryce Young. One play later, David Montgomery is running into the end zone, and it's 28-7 with about 3 minutes left before halftime. And that really felt like it was it. I mean, credit to the Panthers for continuing to fight. They put up some points, put up some late touchdowns in this game to keep it relatively interesting. But I felt like Detroit, kind of took its foot off the gas to begin the third quarter. Probably could have been uglier than it was. Yeah.
They had a big injury in this one. Cornerback Emmanuel Mosley tore his ACL. He had just come back from a torn left ACL. He tears his right ACL this time. Brutal. They're hoping to have him help improve their secondary. Now, obviously, that's going to be a problem. They did have that sweet flea flicker. Jamison Williams played like 28 snaps, I want to say. Didn't do much. In fact, alligatored unarmed a ball over the middle. Exactly the sort of thing that's going to drive Dan Campbell crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, that was kind of the big takeaway, was that drop. He did bring in 2 other targets, but just for 2 yards, basically, trying to get him out in space, failed to do that. Still encouraging. I think that he played 28 snaps. That was, I believe, more than he played at any game last season. So that, if nothing else, it looks like he's kind of hitting the ground running and is ready to go physically. But yeah, not the most encouraging return for Jamison Williams. Not really getting anything down the field for him. I'm trying to think if I have any other notes here. Not a whole lot. I mean, on the Carolina side, we did see Chuba Hubbard out snap and out carry Miles Sanders, which is a little concerning. Maybe some of that was the fumble for Miles Sanders. Obviously, this was not a mega high volume rushing game for Carolina. In fact, we saw Laviska Shenault carry 5 times for 27 yards. Always loved
almost
to see
scored.
involved. He did. Dude, I don't know why the Jags gave up on him. Like he's an upgrade over Jamal Agnew, but that's a story for a different day. Last thing I'll say on Carolina, Adam Thielen continues to prove me wrong. Like I did not consider drafting Adam Thielen anywhere. He goes 11 for 107 and a touchdown.
Yeah. Agreed. On Thielen both, and Agnew is a triggering name for me. Laviska shouldn't be, but it's also I'm never going to use him though because I can never get get volume unless you're in like one of those mega leagues. That the Lions got stopped on a 4th down, but then Sanders had coughed up that fumble right after that, and that was a bad fumble too. It was out early. I mean, and that's something Sanders does. It's a problem for him. Always has been a problem in his career. So, anyways. I don't have a ton of other notes on this game. I did use the Lions in Circa Survivor. Very happy about that. Thank you very much. So it does take them out of the mix for me for Thanksgiving because for Circa, that's a separate slate. So I've used San Francisco and I've used Detroit. So I'm almost locked into Dallas or Miami for the Thanksgiving slate now. So, and Miami's a road game at the Jets. So probably almost certainly going to be Dallas for that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to Dallas later in the pod, of course, and what happened last night in San Francisco, but I think you're still okay with that, right? And like, honestly, if you had to use Miami in that situation, that's probably not the end of the world.
Exactly. Speaking of Miami, a lot of people used Miami yesterday against the Giants. The Giants made it interesting for a while. They had that pick 6 against the 102 yards on the return there. But at the end of the day, the Dolphins pulled away. I mean, the 4th quarter was a bit of a snooze. Daniel Jones got hurt in this one here. And again, that Giants offensive line is just so darn bad.
So bad. 6 more sacks for Daniel Jones, including the final one that really ended up knocking him out of the game. Felt like that was kind of the white flag wave for the Giants, who did keep this game competitive. Although, I mean, you had a fumble by Miami earlier in this game that stifled a drive that looked like it was heading in the right direction. Giants didn't do anything with that, but nonetheless, that was kind of another lost possession for Miami. The pick 6 was huge. I mean, that was field flipping. I was actually out playing golf in the morning, so I had to brought the iPad. We got to stream the whole Jags game in the cart, which was fantastic.
Awesome.
Watching that, and but I was still kind of driving back home during the early part of these noon games, and I'm keeping an eye on this one on like the game cast, and I'm like, all right, first and goal from the 4. Let's go. Miami's going to punch this thing in. And then all of a sudden, like the entire app just like refreshes and there's points on the board for the Giants. I'm like, what the hell happened? Like the last thing that crossed my mind is like, oh yeah, Tua probably threw a pick in the end zone and it was 102 yards returned. And that's exactly what happened. Tyreek Hill, it looked like had a chance to chase him down. Good last second block by the Giants to kind of get that cavalcade going. But really outside of that, I think the final score is closer than this game actually was. Not only did you have the pick 6, which was massive, you had another really uncharacteristic interception from Tua. It was actually reminiscent of one of the picks that Mahomes threw last week, where he had a man kind of running wide open and just tossed it right over his head for a pick. We mentioned the other fumble. It was a sloppy game for Miami. I mean, they dramatically lost the total plays battle, the time of possession battle. A lot of quick drives for Miami, a lot of long, unproductive drives for New York. But still, Miami 9.7 yards per play is just ridiculous. 222 rushing yards. Yeah, I mean they're at this point now where when they play a bad team like the Giants, like this was like a B- day for the Dolphins, and they're still cruising to wins just because of how ridiculously efficient that offense is.
Indeed. I mean, and is there anything more comforting knowing that you have Tyreek Hill right now, aside from Christian McCaffrey? Maybe
I used Jefferson over him in DFS and regret it. I regret it. He is just a machine, man. He's so good.
He is. He really is. So. Not too many huge takeaways. We're going to obviously check Jones's status heading into the week. It could be Tyrod Taylor that you're picking up in super flex leagues this week.
Ooh, I love that. I will say we should talk about Devon Achane, who had another big day. He finished 11 for 151, 76-yard touchdown, accounting for the bulk of that yardage. He is now 2nd in the NFL, Jeff, in rushing yards. He's 37th in total carries, 71.1% success rate. According to Pro Football Reference, that is number 1 in the NFL by a mile. And right after him are DeAndre Swift and Jalen Hurts. When you think of who's run through the biggest holes this year, it's DeAndre Swift, and Achane is still blowing them out of the water. By comparison, Christian McCaffrey, who I think is the best running back in the NFL and has a great offensive line, his success rate is only 55%. So that kind of puts into perspective just how crazy this has been for Achane. 12.1 yards per attempt on the season. Obviously, those, if you're ripping off like a 70-yard touchdown every week, that's going to skew the numbers a little bit, but
For sure.
it weirdly feels sustainable, right? Like normally we'd say, oh, this is just a flash in the pan from this rookie. I mean, they got the Panthers next week. That's a defense that's better than the Giants, but has certainly shown some leaks. After that, the schedule does toughen up a little bit, but man, Miami has just become so fun to watch.
If you take away his 76-yard touchdown run, which you can't, which would be dumb if you did, but Achane was still 10 for 75 in his other carries. I mean, that's still 7.5 yards a carry, for crying out loud. It's insane.
Yeah, it really is. And, this is some, pretty deep stuff at this point, but Salvon Ahmed was inactive in favor of Chris Brooks. So you do wonder if Ahmed, if his roster spot is maybe in jeopardy once Jeff Wilson comes back. I like really stupidly 2 weeks ago, I was like, I don't know. I kind of want to see it again with Achane. We'll see when Jeff Wilson's back. Not really worried about that anymore. I mean, if anything, I think he looks better than Mostert.
Yeah. And Mostert still ran well, but he's definitely a lesser option. Mostert 10 for 65, but Achane got a lot of the early snaps too, is somewhat noteworthy there as well. Okay, let's move on. That's the end of the early slate. Let's hit the afternoon games. Philly and the Rams. Kind of a modest output for the Eagles against a pretty good defense, let's be fair, in the Rams. 23-14. We saw Dallas Goedert come back to life this time, and it came at the expense of Devonta Smith.
Yeah, huge game for Dallas Goedert. We've been waiting for this one. He had been just a huge disappointment through the first 4 games, but got him going early. He finished 8 for 117 in a score. Like you said, kind of a no-show from Devonta Smith, but another big game for A.J. Brown. Feels like they've made a point to get A.J. Brown more involved these last 3 weeks, and that's showing through. Yet another game for Philly where they were in control virtually the entire game. They looked like the better team. Threw a pick in the end zone. Really nice play by Ahkello Witherspoon on a drive that should have turned into points. They had 2 more long drives right after that, a 17-play drive that ended in a field goal, and then a 10-play drive that ended in a field goal. Those collectively took up almost 14 minutes of time. Went out on downs late in the game as well. So we don't really see Philly, slamming its foot on the gas as much as last year when it felt like they were finishing drives like that. It felt like always ended in a touchdown for Philly. They are struggling a little bit more, on third downs, especially in the red zone. But you got to feel good about the defense here. Despite Cooper Kupp getting loose, Puka Nacua, those guys combined for 15 catches, almost 200 yards. Other than that, they were able to bottle up the Rams running game and come out with a win and a cover.
Yep. Looking at the target split for the Rams, 12 for Kupp, 11 for Nacua. Is this a harbinger of what we're going to see going forward? Can they coexist like this?
I think they can. I really think they can. I was so anxious to see how these guys were used, and it's just they almost feel interchangeable in some ways, right? I mean, it's one of the strangest and most unlikely elite wide receiver combinations that we've ever seen, right? I mean, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are arguably a top 5 duo in the NFL, if not top 3 at this point with some of the injuries that we've had. I think this was a pretty nice blueprint especially if you're a Nacua holder, right? We knew Cooper Kupp would come back, and whether it was this week or next week or the week after, you know what you're getting from Cooper Kupp. So on one hand, it was great that he was just back to being that guy right away. I mean, he to me looked like full speed Cooper Kupp, but even more encouraging to see both of these guys get theirs in the same game. They get the Cardinals, the Steelers, the Cowboys, and the Packers in their next 4 games. So, I think that Cowboys secondary is certainly looking more exploitable. The Steelers are just week to week. Who knows at this point? But I think you like your chances to get loose against Arizona next week. Yeah, for sure. The odd man out for the Rams, Van Jefferson, 2 snaps, 2. Remember people were like, "Oh, we're going to draft him." Before Nacua obviously emerged, but when we knew Kupp was out, everyone thought, "Okay, Van Jefferson's the guy." Well, he's not only not the guy, he's not even a guy anymore. He's out of the picture completely there. Tutu Atwell's eclipsed him as well, and Atwell's definitely gotten hurt by this, but by Kupp returning, he only had 5 targets, but at least he's on the field, so there is that. Interesting there. I don't have really too many other notes in this game. In fact, if I have Devonta Smith, I'm not that worried, but it is frustrating knowing that he is second fiddle. He's kind of like a poor man's Jalen Waddle at this point. Yeah, I think that's the case, and it's just not quite as productive of an offense as Miami, but no reason to panic. I mean, that's just kind of what happens sometimes. He's a very high end number 2, but when your number 1 is AJ Brown, there are going to be certain weeks where you end up being marginalized. And I think the good thing is, like, if a defense is shutting down Devontae Smith, that means the other guys probably getting loose, and there are going to be weeks where that reverses. We've seen that over the last couple of years. And what you mentioned with Tutu Atwell, there was a kind of a period there where you felt okay about starting him. He's ripping off big plays. Like, he's still going to be on the field. He played 50 snaps. He played almost the same number as Nakua and Kupp. But I think we're now in the territory where, okay, maybe you can hold on to him if you have a roster spot in case Kupp or Nakua were to go down, but probably not really startable at this point.
Yeah, I think you're right about that one there. Let's go to the Hackett Bowl next. Let's go to Jets and Broncos. If you like field goals, this was your game. If you like baffling mistakes, this was your game. This was not a game we're going to be putting in the Louvre.
7 field goals made. So yeah, I mean, if you're really into kicking, I don't know what the Louvre stance is on kicking, but yeah, huge day for Greg Zuerlein. Decent day for Will Lutz. That's about it. We actually opted to take the Jets in Circa Million. So this was a bit more of a sweat than it needed to be. That last fumble return was a moment of jubilation for John and sure. I. Nice 3-2 week, despite losing the 2 games that we thought we were like the biggest locks in Buffalo and Baltimore. But this was a nice way to kind of end the afternoon slate. I mean, I think a lot of kind of how we thought this game would play out ended up happening, right? Like, everybody was on Breece Hall this week, especially in DFS circles. And he goes 22 for 177 at the 72-yard touchdown. It felt like that long run was coming at some point. There were a couple of kind of near misses, and then finally he breaks that one off. Mm-hmm. I didn't think Zach Wilson was all that good. He made some nice throws. Had a big one. I think it was to Tyler Conklin on a 3rd down. To I wouldn't say ice this game, but put the Jets in a much better position when it started to get dicey late. But this wasn't Zach Wilson just going out and single-handedly beating the Broncos. I don't think any of our questions about Zach Wilson have been vanquished. Just comical ending to the game, of course, with Russell Wilson getting stripped, the Jets bringing it back for a touchdown, Wilson getting an earful from Sean Payton on the sideline, kind of dismissing it, and then Robert Saleh. I don't know if you saw that clip this morning, Jeff. The cameras catching him with a quick little stay humble to Sean Payton as they shook hands.
Wow. I did not catch that. That's pretty wild. This game was a bit of a disaster for your wide receiver options. Garrett Wilson, 3 for 54. Cortland Sutton was barely targeted because Sauce Gardner had him covered. Patrick Surtain, in the meantime, did a good job on Wilson. Wilson had a hard time getting on track. Jerry Jeudy was getting more targets, but didn't do a whole lot with them. Marvin Mims had a disaster of a day, fumbled a punt and then fumbled a little trick play. So he barely saw the field. And he was causing negative points when he was on. The only guy that, you feel, besides Hall, obviously, but the only other guy you felt good about was Jaleel McLaughlin, who he looks the part.
He looks incredible. Yeah, we saw a brief glimpse of that last week, but yeah, I mean, he is so quick. And I thought Samaje Perine actually looked okay in this game as well, especially through the air. He gave you 4 for 73, 6 for 22 on the ground. But McLaughlin, I mean, he has noticeable burst that really jumps off the screen. So that was, as a Jets better, that was the guy I did not want to see carrying the ball throughout the afternoon. I thought he looked really good. But yeah, frustrating day really for all the pass catchers here, unless you had Samaje Perine. Garrett Wilson, they targeted him on a kind of a fade type of route in the end zone. Just a really bad throw by Zach Wilson. I thought the commentators laid that one out pretty clearly. It's got to be up. It's got to be toward the back of the end zone. He basically threw it almost more like a slant. So that was a big play that kind of felt like it swung things back toward Denver's direction. But once again, I think the Broncos have proven that they are among the worst teams in the NFL. And had it not been for a 21-point comeback against the Chicago Bears, they'd be staring at 0-5, traveling to Kansas City next week. They actually play the Chiefs twice in the next 3 weeks. Then they get the Bills after that.
Yep. Not great. And their track record against the Chiefs lately is horrendous too. So not happy times in Denver right now for sure. Chiefs and the Vikings. This was the Chiefs took a while to get going in this one here, even before Kelsey got hurt. They didn't really fire away. And of course, I kind of was counting on Mahomes and Kelsey. That was my DFS build. I decided to go that route. At least I got late production there. I got the late touchdown. I thought I was going to be totally screwed when Kelsey got hurt before halftime there, but Kelsey ended up 10 for 67, a lot of short passes. It worked here. He didn't get those big plays. Mahomes 281 and 2 touchdowns. He didn't run at all yesterday, which was interesting. No scrambling from there, but instead, it was actually the defense that won the day for the Chiefs.
Yeah, that's probably the third time we could say that this year. I mean, it wasn't a bad game offensively for Kansas City, but you're still kind of waiting for that next level to show up. And I think Travis Kelce going out of this game for a little bit, that was the big scare. Obviously, he came back and scored the touchdown. We saw the Chiefs come out of halftime with back-to-back long touchdown drives, but then Minnesota answers. It's back to a 7-point game. The Chiefs punt, and Minnesota had a pretty good chance to, at the very least, tie this game late in the fourth quarter. I thought it was the right call, picking up the flag in the end zone. I forget who the defender was, but did not look to me like pass interference or any sort of defensive holding. But that was kind of the end of it for Minnesota. We talked about Justin Jefferson at the top. Once he went out of the game, and even before that, I mean, Jordan Addison was the guy who really got loose here.
Yeah.
He to me is starting to look like the pretty clear number one rookie wide receiver. I think there are some weeks where Zay Flowers, when he's actually catching the ball, will be in that conversation, but he made some really tough catches, absorbed some big hits, 6 for 64 and a touchdown. Nonetheless, though, Minnesota still sitting at 1-4. They do get the Bears on the road next week. After that, it's the 49ers, another team that I think, within a couple weeks here, we're going to know, is their season actually over, or do they have a fighting chance to try to scrap for, 8 or 9 wins and maybe get a wild card spot? It's just everything that's gone their way, the last really 2+ seasons, it's all come back around.
They really need those head-to-heads against the Lions to go their way to have a chance. I think that's going to be the key for them. I think Addison's the number one receiver dynasty-wise, but Puka has got to be the rookie of the year for a wide receiver so far, right? But things can change on that one. Plenty of time still. But Addison's going to get a lot of work next week, regardless. Even if Jefferson plays, I think you're going to see a little bit more Addison than you've had in previous weeks, and it's a good week to have it. So we'll see about that. But unlike the Commanders, I think the Vikings will throw it to their better wide receivers. So
it's a wild strategy, but I think they might try it.
Yeah, just crazy enough to work there. All right, let's finish off with the Niners and Cowboys. The beat me down on Sunday night.
We said last week when we were kind of talking ourselves back and forth on this game, I believe it was on XM. It's like, I could see Dallas winning. I could see Dallas keeping it close. I could also obviously see the 49ers winning, but I could only see one team winning in a blowout, and that was San Francisco. And I mean, the route was on basically right away. San Francisco marches down, scores on its first drive, and the Dallas offense just looked completely out of sync, especially in the first half. And really, they never got a whole lot of momentum going. I mean, Dak was just throwing pick after pick after pick as they kind of got into desperation mode early in the third quarter. There was the one drive that made it 14-7 in the middle of the second quarter where Dak hit Keontae Turpin on a nice ball. And you felt like, okay, maybe Dallas could get something going here. But San Francisco immediately answered with another touchdown. And this was just a reminder, I think, of how ridiculously consistent this Niners team is. Like, would I bet them to go 17-0? No. But at the same time, it's like, where are they going to be tripped up? If you're beating Dallas this badly, I mean, beating them in every single phase of the game, like what team on their schedule is going to get them? Maybe it's at Philly later in the year. They get the Ravens. They play your Bengals in a few weeks. They're looking better. Like, again, I think they get tripped up somewhere, but it's gotten to the point with this team where they're so consistent. And you're like, if Brock Purdy is not injured, and they would need like 2 or 3 skill guys to go out, to really feel bad about this team. I mean, they built one of the deepest and most talented rosters that we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, for sure. The only thing that's frustrating is like that it seems to be one person's turn on a given night to the exclusion of others. So yesterday was a Kittle day, although it's funny. He had 3 catches. He had 4 targets. He still had 3 touchdowns. I mean, it was just that day. Ayuk's awesome. And in another team, he could be a target monster. I got to say, though, Cowboys are losing the whole time. Somehow CeeDee Lamb gets 5 targets. What in fresh hell is going on here, Nick?
I would like to just say credit to the San Francisco 49ers defense, I suppose, but you got to make more of a point to get CeeDee Lamb involved. And this is becoming a little bit of a concerning trend. Even with the Cowboys, winning big against New England last week. I mean, this is now 3 straight games where he's had exactly 4 catches. He's been held under 55 yards. That's not what you signed up for with CeeDee Lamb. He has 1 touchdown on the year. Even his big receiving game against the Jets, he did not find the end zone. I think he's kind of gone a little bit under criticized. When we talk about who have been the biggest disappointment so far, coming into this week at least, you didn't hear a lot of people say CeeDee Lamb, but I think that's going to be a much more popular topic. They do have a plus matchup against the LA Chargers. That could certainly be a shootout in Los Angeles next week. So maybe that's maybe that's when CeeDee Lamb gets back on track. But yeah, it's been a rough start for him. Obviously, a rough day overall for the Cowboys offense. And I think last night was another reminder of we've seen these games from Dak. It feels like there's 2 or 3 of them every year. Like,
yeah,
I don't want to say he's a front runner, but it's like when things get bad, like when it feels like the momentum is all going the other way. It's like Dak almost gets kind of sucked into that, and we saw it with the interceptions.
Yeah. Well, next week will Brandon Staley say to Mike McCarthy to stay humble, as it's the Kellen Moore Bowl? I don't know. It's possible, but because bring back Kellen Moore, man. At least he would have fed CD the ball a little bit more. Just I don't know. And the thing is, they couldn't stop San Francisco either, so they couldn't get going. Dak was terrible. I mean, he's getting sacked a decent amount too, getting pressured, but still 3 picks, 3 sacks. I mean, game over. I mean, Pollard lost a fumble. I mean, everything went wrong in this game.
Yeah, it was a disaster for Dallas. It really was. I think this was a huge game, more so for Dallas than for San Francisco, to kind of prove that you're in that same category. And yeah, I know after the game, Micah Parsons said, yeah, we just had a lot of mistakes. A lot of things didn't go our way. We still think we're on their level. And I think that's what you have to say. I know I saw some people kind of killing him on Twitter for that, but it's like, what are you going to do? You could be like, oh yeah, they're way better than us. Sorry, we can't beat them. I still think talent-wise, they are relatively close, but the Niners are on a different level. And like you said, it's almost become a bad thing for fantasy because you can't, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, they can't all have a big game every single week. It's just not statistically possible. Right. So, obviously you're always going to feel good about McCaffrey, who extended his touchdown streak, but that was kind of the one thing I guess you could say about Dallas. And this waned as the game went along. We saw Jordan Mason rip off some big runs at garbage time, but they did do a pretty decent job stopping McCaffrey on the ground.
Yeah, they did. They did. It was like less than 3 yards a carry. Seemed like that was their focus, I guess. And so, yeah, mission accomplished. Make Brock Purdy beat us. Oh, he beat us. Okay. Back to the drawing board.
Throws in this game.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And he's been on point all season long. I mean, that Steelers game, he was dialed in his first game back. And this is a guy coming off of a major elbow injury in a playoff game. So it's not like he was missing some of the regular season, had more time to recover. No, he had about as little time as possible to recover. And not just a playoff game, but the NFC Championship game. Goes from that to looking better than ever. What a scouting coup to find Purdy in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, we're beyond the point now where you could say, oh, it's just a system. We're like 3 weeks or what, I guess like 5 weeks removed from people thinking, oh, maybe it'll be Sam Darnold and he'll just be the next Brock Purdy
right.
For Kyle Shanahan. I mean, like, look, it's certainly part of it. Like, I'm not going to say that Brock Purdy would be, he's 7-1 to win MVP right now, by the way, opened at 50-1. I don't think he'd be 7-1 to win MVP if he was the quarterback of the Carolina Panthers. So certainly there's some infrastructure credit here, but I don't know how you could watch Brock Purdy and just think he's a system quarterback. I mean, I think last night was just yet another reminder of how dialed in this guy is. Some of the accuracy on those throws across the field. Sometimes it's a little, Aaron Rodgers-like. I know there's talk of like, oh, this is Tom Brady 2.0. But the way he kind of sits back in the pocket, he kind of almost fades away on some of those throws. And it's just such a pretty path that ball takes. I mean, if you bet Brock Purdy at 50-1 before the year to win MVP, I actually kind of like that bet. I don't know if I'd make it at 7-1 right now. Obviously, guys like Mahomes and Tua and Allen and Hurts will have something to say. Even McCaffrey on his own team. I think this is actually a really interesting debate. Like, let's say the Niners go 16-1. They're clearly the best team in the league. Like, I could see Purdy and McCaffrey almost splitting votes. I know it's not a running back award anymore, but I still watch this team and think McCaffrey is really what makes it go.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he's definitely still in the mix too. And he did get his score, so he's continued his touchdown streak, which is pretty impressive too. It is. If you're drafting today, are you drafting CMC first? Are you going to draft Tyreek Hill first? Are you going to, now that Jefferson's hurt, it's kind of unfair, but
yeah, right. Knowing what we know now, I was thinking about this last night watching the game. Like, CMC took some huge hits. There was one where his helmet was like knocked kind of sideways, and I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot that this guy's like a huge injury liability. There's something like, since he's come to San Francisco, I feel like that has kind of evaporated. Like, it's still in the back of my mind, that he had all the injury issues in Carolina. So for that reason, I think I would say Tyreek Hill, but I mean, either of those guys are a rock solid choice. I also think, we knew Miami's offense would be good. We didn't know it would be on this level.
Exactly right. All right. We've covered every game. Anything else you want to add before we take off?
No, not too much, man. I mean, I'm excited for Packers and Raiders tonight. Obviously, if Aaron Jones doesn't play, that certainly makes me feel a little bit queasy about my Packers pick here, but interested to see if Green Bay can bounce back. It's been a long time since that Thursday night atrocity against Detroit, and I think we've kind of gone week to week on the Packers. It's like, are they good? Are they not good? Are they just an average team? I think this game will tell us a lot. Going on the road to a Las Vegas team that is very, very beatable. And if Green Bay struggles again tonight, I think we might have to kind of do a recalibration as far as what the upside is there. But excited for that. We're just 3 days away from Thursday night football as well. The cycle continues.
Indeed, it does. Chiefs and Broncos on Thursday night. Boy. So should be a fun one there. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Thanks to Circa Sports for their sponsorship. Thank you for your comments in the forum. Take care. Have a good day.